So I mentioned that I went to Belgium. What brought me to Belgium? Well, as near as I can figure, it was the closest thing I've ever experienced to hearing an answer to a prayer. I'm trying to explain this to you. You see, on May 18th of 1996, something happened to me that has completely altered my perception of the world I live in, the life I have lived, and the future that I can no longer comprehend. In a tragic car accident in San Francisco, my brother David died. Now, there's a funny thing that happens to you when your brother, your baby brother, one of your best friends in the entire world and one of your favorite people on the entire planet, a funny thing happens to you when they die. To put it simply, it makes you sad. So sad that it overwhelms you. It consumes you. And you find it very difficult to function in the world. Now listen, I tried therapy. Lord knows I tried therapy, and I thank God for my insurance plan because I found therapy to be a crock of shit. Don't get me wrong, I think that therapy is great for some people. It's just that this was my problem. You see, I grew up in Davis. It's a small town. It's a tiny town. So when my brother David died, his picture was plastered on the front page of the local paper twice in 1 week above the fold. One time to announce his death, and a second time to review his funeral. We got a very favorable review. So the first day that I walked into my therapist's office, the first thing he said to me was, "I've read a lot about you and your family and your brother in the paper." Now listen, anybody who has ever tried to convince me on this concept of therapy has told me that the greatest thing about therapy is that you can be completely and totally anonymous. But right away I felt like my anonymity was out the door. But that was okay, I was willing to give it a shot. He sat me down and he said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "To tell you the truth, I'm kind of sad." And he said, "Why are you sad?" And I said, "Because my brother died." So we talked about it. In the next session, "How are you feeling?" "Still sad." "Why are you still sad?" "Because my brother's still dead." And the next session, "How are you feeling?" "Still sad." "Why are you still sad?" "Because my brother's still dead." Let's face it, everybody, there is no cure for a dead brother. On our final session, my therapist told me that he hated to tell me this, but my insurance had run out and he was going to start having to charge me $100 an hour for these enlightening conversations, and he really thought we should continue. Gee, I wonder why he thought we should continue. So I said goodbye, and since then I've come to recognize that my life has been so incredibly wacky that I find myself here today with this overwhelming desire to talk to somebody, but I don't want to pay a therapist $100 an hour, so I thought what I would do is this. So here we go, look. My relationship with death started very close to my relationship with life. I was only 3 years old when my Aunt Karen was shot to death by her lesbian lover. Lesbians seem to haunt me. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against lesbians in general, I just have something against certain lesbians. Lesbians who, I don't know, kill my family members? Or lesbians who, gee, I don't know, steal my girlfriends? As a matter of fact, I'm probably a lesbian's wet dream. Well, maybe not a lesbian's wet dream, but a gay activist's wet dream, because I represent exactly what all activists are eventually trying to accomplish, and that's this: I don't care. I don't care if you're a lesbian. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're straight. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're white. I don't care if you're Jewish. I don't care what you are. As long as you don't do anything to hurt me and the people that I love, then I don't care what you are. I'm a die-hard liberal, and I'm against affirmative action. That's how much I don't care. Well, it wasn't until my brother Dave died that I actually mustered up the courage to discuss with my mother the circumstances surrounding her sister's death. For my entire life, I thought that in a moment of passionate anger, my aunt was simply shot in the head and she died. Well, it turns out she wasn't just shot in the head. She was shot in the head, she was shot in the chest, and she was shot in the arm. She was shot 3 fucking times. Now, that in my mind is not a moment of passionate anger. That, in my mind, is a moment of cold-blooded murder. Here's the point. You see, my Aunt Karen was only 24 years old when she died. My brother David was only 24 years old when he died. And, coincidentally, James Dean was only 24 years old when he died. My biggest fear in Dave's death is that he's just going to become the one who died. Because that's the way Karen feels to me. It feels like she's just the one who died. It's like she was here for a while, yes, and then she died, and now she isn't here anymore. Don't get me wrong, I know that everybody thinks about Karen, but we never talk about her. Christ, it took me 24 years and the death of my brother to actually discuss her with my mom. I don't want that to happen to Dave. And that's why I'm willing to get up here in front of people and talk about it. Because I think we should talk about him. I think we should talk about him. I think we should think about him. And I think we should remember him fondly. Because I think he deserves that. So let's talk about him. Look, my brother Dave didn't just die when he went through the windshield of my sister's car, no. His skull was smashed in, his back was broken, his neck was broken, but he was not dead. And because he was not dead, they were able to keep him alive on life support for over 24 hours. Why? So they could salvage his organs. Took out his beautiful little heart and put it into another person's body. And because he was kept on life support, I had the pleasure of visiting him in the hospital. I was in Disneyland when I got the news. You know Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. My band had gone down there to play a gig at the Roxy in Hollywood. Dave was supposed to go with us, and I still don't know why he didn't. We got the news and we took the first flight up to San Francisco. My friend Casey Bowman picked us up at the airport. He drove us to the hospital. We walked into the hospital room and there he was. And I gotta tell you something, he never looked worse in his life. Because his skull was smashed in, it was wrapped in a bandage. Because his back was broken, he was strapped to a board and tilted uncomfortably just a little bit sideways. His left eye had been crushed, so it was swollen completely. And not only was his left eye swollen, but his entire body was swollen. His fingers, his arms, his chest, his legs. But that didn't keep me from walking up to his beautiful little bloodied ear and whispering a little white lie. I walked up to his ear and I said, "Dave, listen. I don't care what anybody else says. I think you look beautiful. I don't think you've ever looked more beautiful in your life. I think you look picture perfect." That really happened. And it drives me crazy that this was the last memory of my brother Dave. I wish to God that the last memory of my brother Dave could have been 2 weeks earlier, the last time I saw him conscious. My band played a gig in San Francisco, and after the gig, me and my brother Dave and my friend Phil Sequeira went back to Dave's house to drink Jim Beam and talk. We drank a lot of Jim Beam and we got a little bit drunk. So I did what I do when I get a little bit drunk on Jim Beam. I started to dwell on the morbid and dwell on the negative, and in particular, my favorite subject, love, and how much love sucks. And I sat there on the couch. I was lying down and I said to him, "You know, I don't know what it is about love. It's like my ex-girlfriend, Sue. I went out with Susan for 5 years. She's my best friend in the world. Anytime anything happens to me, if it's interesting, if it's happy, if it's funny, if it's tragic, I call Sue. I only called 3 people when Dave died. I called my boss to let him know I wouldn't be into work the next day. I called my girlfriend at the time to let her know that I wouldn't be coming home and somebody else was going to pick up my stuff. And I called Sue because I needed her. But for some reason, it didn't work out with Sue. And I don't want to be with Sue. Can love exist? Can love exist? I don't know." So I laid down on the couch and I closed my eyes and gently I wept. And Dave was all the way across the room. It was a very long room. And the next thing I knew, he was caressing my brow. Much like my mother used to do when I was sick with the flu. It was as if he was telling me, "Don't worry, my friend. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay." And I wish that that was the last memory of my brother Dave, but it wasn't. It was when he was swollen and bloodied in a hospital room. And although I do admit it was a little white lie, there's a part of me that still does believe he looked picture perfect.